how did I end up a captive? Well, one day we were on a very normal routine mission. We took off out of Bogota, Colombia, and we had a brand new set of programming on the sensor. For back then, it was very high speed, man. I could take our camera, I could point it at something on the ground, and then point it to something else, and I could measure airstrips, or if I was tracking a vessel, I could hit it with the laser, then hit it again, and I can get its direction, its speed, and all these cool things this new program was allowing us to do. So we had just taken off out of Colombia, out of Bogota, and we were heading south, crossing the mountain range, and I was sitting in the back seat, and I was just testing out all this new software, man, and it was just another beautiful day. I mean, the skies were clear, the weather was perfect, the mountains looked beautiful, triple canopy jungle, and I'm working the sensor. I'm just trying to find something distinctive that I can point at and try to get some measurements and things like that. When all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, I hear this very loud noise. It's just a bzzz sound. And my buddy Keith, who's sitting next to me, he basically almost jumps out of his seat. And he knew exactly what was going on when that noise happened. I didn't understand what was going on. And, we're all in the airplane. We've got headsets on, and Keith calls to the pilots and says, "Hey, what was that?" And then our pilot was super calm, and he said, "That was an engine failure, sir." And I looked beyond my workstation, and I looked to the front of the airplane, and I see the prop is not moving, man. It's just sitting there, and I'm like, oh, no. We're in an airplane. It's got only one engine, and we just lost the engine. So Keith goes, "Mark, make the Mayday call." And I did, but I didn't make the Mayday call to our home base. For me, man, I went straight to Jesus, because I knew we weren't going to survive that plane crash. And I also knew, man, I had a list of sins, man. I had to go and ask for forgiveness for it, and I didn't have enough time. And I just, I said a real quick prayer, man. I just asked the Lord to forgive me and for everything that I had done wrong, and if it's His will, to accept me into the kingdom. Then I prayed for my kids, for my family, and I prayed that they would have peace. And then I finished off the prayer just asking if it's within His will that we survive that crash. And so, if there's been a few other plane crashes in the Colombian jungle, and nobody survives those. When you crash into the mountains in the jungle, that's not a survivable event. No one survives. And so I wasn't expecting for us to survive.
So not to interrupt, but at this point in time, you thought you were going to die.
For sure. Yeah.
When you saw that prop stop, you thought you were going to die.
Yeah. That's what I was expecting, man. And that's why my Mayday call didn't go to Magic Worker, who was our home base. That's who we would call into. It went to Jesus first. Then but I didn't have a lot of time to pray, and so I finished, and then I had to go to work, and so the airplane, anything that's loose in the airplane when you're going for impact is a projectile. So, I'm buckled, and I started securing everything that was loose in the airplane. We had cases of water, we had duffel bags, we had all kinds of stuff. We had duffel bags with weapons. We had one rifle. We had another duffel bag with pistols. Back then, we didn't carry on our bodies, but we were allowed to have some weapons on board in case of an accident. I secured everything, got back into my seat, got secured, and again, just was waiting for it, and Keith and I were basically taking turns on the radio, calling in our geo coordinates as we were gliding in. While I was securing everything, the pilots, we had two pilots, they were doing their calculations. Basically, the plane doesn't just fall out of the sky once you lose an engine, but it's a glider, and it can only glide going down. And so they were trying to figure out if we had enough altitude to glide over the mountain range. And, they went through their restart procedures, trying to restart the engine, and it just wasn't lighting back up. And so we were a glider, and, I'm sitting in my seat, and I'm like looking out the window, trying to see if there's anything flat or if there's anything that's just not covered in trees, if there's any clearings at all. And it was bad, man. It didn't look like we were going to make it. But then all of a sudden, Tommy Janis, our pilot, he saw a little tiny, and when I say like this, man, a little tiny postage stamp clearing. And he said, that's where we're going. We're going to land there. And so we went from trying to maintain every ounce of altitude to now having to burn it all off so that we could land in that little tiny clearing. And man, I've got to give it to Tommy Janis because he did all of these things with the airplane, maneuvering it and trying to keep the speed low to bring us down into that clearing.
When you saw that clearing, when this happened, when the clearing was made apparent, he's like, that's where we're going. Was there any hope then? Because you just went from, everybody in the plane possibly thought that, hey, we're all going to die. Now you're going to a place that, hey, that little tiny clearing, that's where we're going. Was there hope? Did you feel any hope?
Yeah, no, instant hope. Instant hope. It still seemed like a long shot, but that was better than the alternative that we had before that, which was nothing. It was just to keep gliding until we smashed into the side of a mountain. So yeah, there was a lot of hope. And I've got to hand it to our pilot, Tommy Janis, because we're in communication. We have headsets on. We're all talking to each other throughout all of this. And the guy was never nervous, man. He was just cool as ice. Like when I got on the radio to call in our coordinates, the first few times, man, my voice was shaky. Like I could not keep it cool. And Tommy Janis, he's flying the airplane and it's like nothing. It's just another day in the office for this dude. And I mean, he's a very high time pilot. He was in a very elite Special Forces Army group, Delta Force. I mean, he flew for them. So Tommy Janis is a guy that, he's been there and done it, but it showed. People will talk, but then when things happen, then you see the reality. He was cool as ice, and he did everything exactly perfectly. He brought us through a couple banking maneuvers, and there was a few times when the stall buzzer on the airplane went off. The stall buzzer is a little bzzz, and when that goes off, that means the plane is going too slow to fly. That means it'll fall out of the air. And there was a few times we heard the stall buzzer go off as we went in to make this crash landing, and he just brought us in perfectly, man. Just perfectly. It's amazing. So we're getting ready for the impact. I remember making the last radio call in with our coordinates, and he said, get ready. We're going to brace yourselves. We're going to hit. And I just, I was all belted in. Keith was belted. We were all ready. And I just grabbed the bottom of my chair and I closed my eyes and we hit. And it was like, boom. I opened my eyes and I could just see, it looked like the side of the fuselage just kind of cracked open. And then we hit one more time and we came to a complete stop. And I remember I jammed one of my fingers but I had like a funny feeling in my back, but it wasn't pain yet. And I looked at myself, I'm like, we're alive.